Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis, here on a Saturday morning, bright and early, to get you guys the absolute necessary pregame Cardinals podcast. I'm with, I got a guest today, Craig Morgan, who works for PHNX. It is a company affiliated with All City Network. They do some really good stuff. Nationally, have a company in Chicago, all over the map, but Craig's been around that team and that market for a long time, so it was fun to catch up with him to talk about this game, which is an interesting one. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the spread for this game is 3 points in favor of the Vikings. The Vikings are laying 3, which means essentially if you factor in home field advantage, Vegas is saying these teams are probably similarly rated, which to me, it's interesting. It's not all that surprising. Looking through each team's profile and watching some of the film, you'll probably feel it on the podcast in the way that I talk about it. But I think Arizona has some interesting weapons, some very underrated weapons. Defensively, it is a massive question mark, but they structurally do some stuff to make things tough. So really fun to dive into it fully with Craig Morgan, who knows that team really well. Think you guys will enjoy that. In the meantime, if you have not, over at The Athletic, wrote a pretty big story early this week on Cam Akers, the Vikings running back who has recovered from 2 Achilles tears, which is, an unbelievable kind of medical feat. Wrote about Daniel Jones and why that signing really made sense for both sides. If you listen to the podcast and you listen this past week, you probably weren't that surprised, or hopefully you weren't. That was kind of the goal of putting that together. You start to hear things, you feel things, and it felt like that was trending probably towards Daniel Jones signing with Minnesota. And again, I really wrote this, but it was like almost the same reason the Vikings signed him is the same reason he signed with the Vikings. It's a team that cares about the position, to think about the infrastructure, both in the present and the future. And he's a guy who wanted to be with a team that cared about the quarterback infrastructure for the present and the future. So it made a lot of sense to me. Hopefully people don't go crazy about it. It is what it is. We'll see kind of how he assimilates over the next few weeks and what it ultimately becomes. But looking forward to getting to meet him, getting to know him a little bit. We'll probably dive into his history a little bit over at The Athletic, so check that out. Before we hop into the convo with Craig Morgan, please, right below here, if you're watching on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button. You can hit the little bell, get some alerts, like this, whatever. It helps us out, and it's been fun growing the channel over this season. I have had an absolute blast doing it, talking to you guys, talking with you guys, so please do that. It'll help us out. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, that would also be phenomenal if you can rate, review, do stuff over there. This show is presented by First Resource Bank. I introduced that last week. These guys over there are absolutely phenomenal. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson, as good of people as you will find in this market. It is a local bank. You guys want to support local companies. I know you do. They have branches all over the upper Midwest. So please go check them out. The link to their website is down below. They have an online banking platform that's awesome. It's really like a personal feel with how they operate. And again, they're Vikings fans. So you want to get a new bank account. You want to set it up to where you have a phenomenal platform to use. And then you want to talk Vikings with the people that are going to help you, work with your money. I don't know why you wouldn't do that. Seems absolutely like a no-brainer. First Resource Bank, cannot thank them enough for presenting the Alec Lewis Show. Without further ado, we're going to get into the conversation on the Vikings-Cardinals game with Craig Morgan. Craig, welcome to the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate you being here. I know it's been a busy week in Arizona, a lot of college football going on, but appreciate you hopping on the show.
Well, you hooked me up big time for Outside the Nest, the feature that we run every week. I appreciate all of your insights on the Vikings. I think that really helped our readers, so happy to pay it back.
Insights is what people never say that for me. So no, it was fun. When we spoke over the phone, I was commuting through the MSP parking terminal. It was not the easiest. Let's just hop right into this game. I'm curious what type of vibe you have entering it in terms of just how you feel like people around that building and Cardinals fans in general are kind of approaching and how they're thinking about this matchup.
Well, I think they're pretty nervous. You probably know the stat. The Cardinals have not won in Minnesota since 1977. I'm not sure if you were alive then, Alec.
I was not, unfortunately.
I was, so we can lay that out there. But it's aside from the fact that they haven't had any success, and I'm not even sure how much history plays into these sorts of matchups. Minnesota's having an unbelievable season. Obviously one of the biggest surprises in the NFL. It's a really tough place to play. They understand that. And they're coming off a performance in Seattle, which was a little bit deflating. They were on a winning streak, and they had a chance really to all but lock up the NFC West with a win in Seattle, because they would have been 2 games up on every team in the division. They would have beaten each of those teams, the 49ers, the Rams, and the Seahawks, once each. They'd be 3-0 in the division, so it would have felt like a 3-game lead this late in the season. That would have been a really good place to be. Instead, they drop all the way to the number 8 seed and out of the postseason picture, and now they've got this brutal game. I think a lot of people are expecting a better response. They were coming out of the bye, maybe didn't look as focused. There was some concern that they wouldn't be able to carry their momentum out of the bye. I'm not sure if that's the best narrative. Their O-line was just awful in that game. That's the narrative of that game. The unit that's probably been the most consistent and effective for them was just awful in Seattle, but they're playing against a desperate team that was fighting for survival. It may have just been a one-off, but at the very least, I think they're expecting a response this week.
Yeah, that game seemed to be so interesting, and I assume you were there, but I mean, you know how it is. When you cover these games, you're not paying attention to the entire slate. And so at the end of this past Sunday, the Vikings obviously beat the Bears, and I get home and I'm looking through the scores and and I'm like, what was this game? It was just I think it was 16-6. It didn't feel like the Cardinals ran the ball well, and we'll get into James Conner a little bit, but I think he's one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL. And then I watched the film this week as I was commuting back for Thanksgiving, and there were moments where I'm thinking they didn't look that bad, but then the offensive line, it was a question that I had for you. It's not the sexiest podcast talker, but I wondered, like, what has this unit been, and what do you feel like the issue was first and foremost in that game?
Well, what this unit has been is, as I said earlier, they're most consistent, and that's a statement because they lost Jonah Williams, the right tackle they went out and got in the offseason. He was going to be their starter, and he went down at the end of the first quarter of the season opener in Buffalo with a knee injury. So immediately you take one key piece out of the lineup. They already moved Paris Johnson over to the left side, the first-round pick, his natural position in his second season. And then they also lost Will Hernandez a little later in the season. I think it was week 5. So you're talking about pulling 2 starters out of the lineup, and yet they hadn't missed a beat. They had really looked good, and you could make an argument that they had actually improved their play as the season wore along. Of course, they had that winning streak. There were a lot of people wondering, with Jonah ready to come back in the lineup that week in Seattle, if they should make the move, because Kelvin Beachum, the veteran swing tackle, had played so well at that position and surprised them so much. There was some concern and there was some discussion internally over whether they should really upset the apple cart at that point. Should they just keep continuity? Should they keep the chemistry that they had going along the offensive line? Now, I know a lot of Cardinal fans were blaming that decision for all of the breakdowns, but I think that's a massive oversimplification. Actually, Jonah Williams played all right in that game. He wasn't the major problem along the line. I mean, Leonard Williams blew up the interior of their line. Paris Johnson probably had his worst game as a Cardinal. There were issues all over. And as you mentioned, they couldn't get the run game going. That is the Cardinals' offense. They want to establish the run. This is no secret in the NFL, of course, but they want to establish James Conner, and that opens up the play action in the passing game for Kyler Murray. They could never get that going. As a result, Seattle just teed off on him. Kyler Murray was running for his life. They couldn't protect him, and it was just a total breakdown on offense.
Yeah, Kyler Murray really. I mean, before the offensive line, and that was really in terms of what I was watching where I started, because I remember, I think a few weeks ago they played the Dolphins, and I think the Vikings played a night game, and I was watching him. I'm like, this guy has been incredibly impressive. Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings head coach, I'm sure you know, Craig, but he is a guy who. Like, I don't know this is his process, but as he's preparing to call plays on Sunday, I think before he does any of his, like, study in terms of defensive tendencies, I think he just watches the opposing team's quarterback because he loves quarterback play so much. And he's praised Kyler Murray really all week in terms of the job he's felt like Kyler has done in this offense. And he is a guy in Kevin O'Connell who – knows Kyler very well from their time, obviously, out west. So, I mean, I was looking at the numbers. Kyler, fourth highest big-time throw rate, really low turnover-worthy play rate. He's kind of in the middle in completion percentage, top half passer rating, top half efficiency. Like, you've watched this guy for a long time. What has it been this year compared to years past, and why?
Just maturity, and I think that's just a product of age. There are other factors. I'll get into those in a minute. But when we talked to Kyler at the beginning of the season, really in camp, there was just a difference in his voice with all that he's been through with the Cliff Kingsbury era and that relationship really souring toward the end. I think an offense that really didn't cater to Kyler because I think it put too much on his back. He's got a new coach and a new support system that I think is much better. You and I talked about infrastructure, the importance of infrastructure to quarterbacks. He's got it here with Drew Petzing, the offensive coordinator, and Jonathan Cannon, the head coach. That matters a lot, but Kyler's also been through a lot. He's been through a lot of losing, which he had never experienced in college. He had the ACL injury that he had to fight back from. He just sounded more mature and more at peace with who he is when we spoke to him in camp, and we've seen that play out this season. You mentioned efficiency. I think that's the best word to describe how he's played. He hasn't turned the ball over. I know he threw the pick six against Seattle. That was a fourth down play where he was trying to get the edge and run for the first down. He was just trying to make a play. It was an ill-advised throw, but we haven't seen much of that. He's really taken care of the ball. He's been efficient. They've run this offense really well. Again, having James Conner helps because you establish that. It's going to open up other things. But Kyler Murray is having a fantastic season. Like up until last week, people were mentioning him in the MVP conversation. Lamar's probably going to win that running away, but Kyler Murray was being mentioned in that conversation, and I didn't think it was hyperbole. He has been that good for this offense this season.
He really he plays, and I know this connotation is going to make people think, but like he plays to me like how I would want to play in a video game. And again, the video game, but like it is, you're fast enough, but you also have the arm strength, but you can get outside the pocket. Like the interception you're talking about, I think it's the right. If it's the same play I saw on film, it's like he scrambled to the right. It's fourth down. He could probably have scrambled for the first down. Instead, he tries to plop it over two defenders, and it just kind of like sails it a little bit. It should have, and it was intercepted, pick six, obviously. But I'm like, man, like if you convert that play, people are like, I mean, people would say it's Mahomes like that's, and I don't want to make him like he is, but really, I watching him, I was very impressed.
Yeah, and then on the play you're talking about, he just didn't feel like – he felt like the defender had the angle on him and he wasn't going to get the first down. But that in itself is a rarity for Kyler Murray because when he's on the move, when he's running, when he's out of the pocket, he has the ability to make plays, not just with his arm, but with his legs. We've seen him run for several touchdowns this season. And in fact, in one, he got the edge and took it all the way to the house and held out the ball like right after he got the edge because he knew he was going. He knew no defenders were going to catch him. That's a weapon, obviously, in his arsenal. That's pretty rare. There are some NFL quarterbacks, obviously, who run the ball well, but Kyler is really effective. And I still feel like when we see that Kyler, when he's running effectively, that's when he's most effective overall. It just seems to spark something in him. It gets everything rolling in him. And that's what makes him, I think, really dangerous.
You mentioned Drew Petzing, too, their offensive coordinator. And I mean, I definitely did not expect this staff to be as creative. And I mean, they're using, I looked this up, they're using 3 tight ends on the field, I believe the second most in the NFL behind Pittsburgh. And it's a 13 personnel for people listening. And it's very in the weeds football. But I mean, one of those tight ends, Trey McBride, he's another guy, just like James Conner. Like, nobody talks about him. I don't think that nationally, maybe in the fantasy circles they do. But Trey McBride, I think he has like 60-something catches this year. So from a skill perspective, I haven't even mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. It feels like if they can block it up Sunday, which is a massive question always against Brian Flores, like these guys can be pretty dynamic. You would agree with that, correct?
Oh, no question. And Trey McBride needs more attention. I think he's second among tight ends in receiving yards already this season, although he hasn't caught a touchdown pass. He's actually fallen on a fumble in the end zone for a touchdown, and he ran one in, but he still hasn't caught one. He had a chance in Seattle. So it's a weird statistic, but he is an elite pass-catching tight end at this point in his career. I wrote a story at the start of the season. This organization has been a black hole for tight ends. They have not had good tight end play over their history. The last really great tight end they had was Jackie Smith back when they were in St. Louis. So it's been that long. And I wrote a story about him chasing Jackie Smith's receiving records. He's a Hall of Famer, and I spoke to Jackie. Trey talked then about wanting to eclipse 1,000 yards. He was honest about it, and I think he's going to get there based on what he's been doing. Right now, he's the number one receiving option for Kyler Murray in this offense. And I think that plays into what I was talking about earlier. You mentioned the 13 personnel that they like to employ a lot. This is a physical team. They want to play physical football. James Conner is a big back. They have an offensive line that I think is better at running the ball than they are at pass protecting. So that really is their identity. He just fits right into that. He's the safety valve, and he's unguardable. He's been unbelievable. He gets open every week and puts up big numbers pretty much every week.
It really is an interesting offense. And again, because I'm kind of a sicko or whatever, I watch the film of every opposing team every week, and I like they're doing stuff in the run game. They're pulling the center. I mean, they're doing stuff that, like gap scheme stuff, counter plays with James Conner, and it is like just physical, vertical, like punch you in the mouth. Quick game in the passing game. Can we just can we just jab you to death? It's very, very interesting. Marvin Harrison, you've covered him obviously this year. How has working with him been? How is he with the media? And then how would his performance stack up to maybe what you would have thought prior to the season?
First off, with the media, he's been great. Every Wednesday, he holds court outside of his stall in the dressing room, really just like Larry Fitzgerald used to do, in the sort of the same spot in the locker room. So
that's awesome.
They've actually extended the lockers 2 more stalls. People said, he's got the same locker as Fitz, but it's actually 2 out. It would have been. He's in the end stall on that same side, so he basically has the Fitz locker. But he talks. He's great. He's open with media. He's very comfortable talking about just about any topic other than himself. That's when he gets shorter with his responses. He doesn't like to talk about himself or praise himself when people are talking about him, but he's very open and friendly. It's clear that he has a lot of experience talking with the media from his time at Ohio State. I think expectations, because of where he went in the draft, were just sky high here. People were comparing him, saying he's the next Larry Fitzgerald. Well, slow down a little bit. Let the guy be a rookie. And I think when people go back and look at Fitz's rookie year, they're like, he actually didn't have, a superstar season. Marvin's on track basically to keep pace with the great receivers of this franchise, Larry Fitzgerald, Anquan Bolden, in his rookie season. So I think he's done what's expected. I think what people are focused on when they look at it week to week is it's been inconsistent, his connection with Kyler Murray. There have been some miscommunications. He's run a wrong route, or he hasn't made the right read. That's expected of a rookie. I don't know why people expected a polished, perfect NFL product in his first season. He's going to make some mistakes. But overall, if I'm judging Marvin Harrison's progress as a rookie, he's on track, and he has shown an ability when he gets one-on-one coverage, which is very rare, that he can make plays.
I'll be very interested to see how Brian Flores tries to defend him. I mean, they faced good receivers this year. Garrett Wilson, obviously, they played the Jets in London. The Texans with Stephon Diggs was healthy, and I would imagine that Flo is going to be very committed to ensuring Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride are covered. And I mean, the James Conner matchup to me is fascinating as well. Like this Vikings run defense has been the best in the NFL. We spoke about that when we talked earlier this week, Craig. And I mean, a guy like this with the vertical downhill run game, what this Vikings defense often does is they shrink the opposing team's menu of runs available. So how Drew Petzing kind of adapts in game, I think those are going to be really key aspects. Defensively, if you were to play a game nationally to name Cardinals defenders besides Budda Baker, I think, I mean, you'd win. Yeah, there's no way. It is a really hard unit to get a feel for. Like I said, watching the film, I'm like, are they playing zone on that side? Are they playing man on that side? Who is that guy? Who's the defensive lineman? LJ Collier, is he good? I like this defense. Describe it for me.
Overachieving, that's the word that I would use without question. When the season began, GM Monty Ossenfort, a Minnesota native himself, was under fire because they did not go out and address a dire need for help on the edge. They needed better edge rushers. They are not an elite pass rushing team. At least they weren't at the start of the season. I wouldn't call them elite either now. But he didn't address it, and then they lose B.J. Ojulari in camp, one of their high draft picks. In fact, they lost both B.J. Ojulari and Darius Robinson, Monty's two highest defensive draft picks before the season ever began. So now they're going into the season really short-handed. They expected Darius to be in the defensive line rotation. They expected B.J. to make an impact on the edge. They don't have either of those guys. Then they lose interior lineman Bilal Nichols, Justin Jones, who you probably know him from the Bears. They lose linebacker Dennis Gardeck, who all three of those guys are starters. They go out of the lineup, and you're thinking, okay, a bad defense is about to get worse. Instead, Nick Rallis schemes them up, and they've been better. I mean, they went a three-game stretch at home where they did not allow a touchdown, which is just astounding given the personnel. You're right. There are no names on this defense other than Budda Baker. People are not going to know these guys. They've got a young secondary. They've got, like, veteran fill-ins along the defensive line. Zaven Collins was supposed to be an impact outside linebacker. He's played pretty well of late, but he's not a guy who's going to rack up sacks. They picked up Baron Browning from Denver. There's just I just go down the list. It's just a who's who of who's. You just don't know. But they are effective. They've been unbelievably effective recently.
It's crazy. Like, and on film, I mean, there were some guys who flashed, like Kaiser White, like the off-ball linebacker. I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of looks like an interesting player. But the cornerbacks, Sean Murphy Bunting, I'm like, this guy's been around the league forever. Starling, I don't even know. Starling Thomas the fifth. I'm like, what is that? Is that like a Key and Peele? Like, and I'm thinking, like, are these guys? These are the guys covering Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison?
Well, yeah, that's going to be an interesting matchup, isn't it? Listen, I will say this about their young corners. Garrett Williams, in particular, has been really good. He's one of their high draft picks from the past couple seasons. They drafted Max Melton. Those guys have been getting a lot of playing time. Sean Murphy Bunting was out of the lineup for a little while. I think if you ask Cardinal fans, they'll probably say he should be out of the lineup permanently because he has been another one of those free agent offseason acquisitions that hasn't played well, just like Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones. If you look at Monty's free agent class, it wasn't very good. But the young corners have played better. They have a massive assignment this week. And that it goes back to the Cardinals needing to generate pressure. If they don't generate pressure on Sam Darnold, I think they're in for a long day. Nick Rallis has managed to do it. I'll give him that. I don't know how he's doing it with the personnel that he has, but they are scheming it up, and they have managed. They had 5 sacks in Seattle with this no-name defense. They've been generating a lot more pressure. They're absolutely going to need to do it against this offense, or they're just going to get torched.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell has been complimentary. He said a couple times this week, and I thought this was interesting. Like, their structures give you a little bit of a challenge. And Kevin is very one of his best in-game strengths is his ability to recognize what the defense is doing and understand how to attack that pretty seamlessly. And it sounded like the way he was talking about it, what Arizona does is so creative and kind of different that it's hard to get a beat on how to then attack it. So we'll see how much that plays a role. Sometimes I just think it's players over plays, and Starling Thomas the fifth, I'm sure he's a great guy, but we'll see what happens. You mentioned Darius Robinson earlier, and I think he was their first-round pick. I went to Mizzou, so I'm a little bit familiar with this guy. I think he's questionable for the game. Could he play? And, I mean, how important of a piece would he be if he was able to be integrated on this defensive front for this game?
I think there's a good chance that he's going to play, that he's going to be in rotation. As to what his pitch count is, they haven't told us. Jonathan Gannon, the head coach, said they have a plan for him if he plays. And I think a lot of that will be dependent on what it looks like, what the game situations look like, what he looks like when he takes the field. They are counting on him at some point being a disruptor in the middle of the line. They really want that presence, and they really need that presence, to be honest. But I think it's a lot to heap on a guy who hasn't played a single snap of regular season football yet to expect him to come in and make a major impact against a quality opponent on the road. So we'll see what he can give. I think he's going to be in this game at some point, but it's going to be, they're playing the long game with Darius Robinson. They expect him to be an impact player down the road. I don't know if it's fair to expect it this week.
It's I'm very excited just for this game in general, but I am. We've talked a lot here locally about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the general manager, and Kevin O'Connell, the head coach. You mentioned Monty Ossenfort being from here, Jonathan Gannon you've talked about. From afar, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like these guys, in a transition from Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim, and where that organization and that football department it feels like these guys have this thing trending in the right direction there. I mean, is that correct? I mean, it really feels like, maybe I'm being struck by, the Monty Ossenfort draft videos where he looks like he is totally on it with his draft maneuvering and Jonathan Gannon. I know there's been some quirky stuff, but it feels like they've done a pretty good job transitioning this thing and kind of, I don't know, solidifying maybe just the credibility of the football operations.
I think that's fair. I think it's early. Obviously, we're not even 2 seasons into their tenure, so it's probably too early to judge, but it does feel like it's moving in that direction. Part of what you can feel, and I know culture gets overused a lot in every sport, but you can feel the culture in this organization. When a coach says something to you in a news conference, and then you're in the room and the players are parroting it with conviction in their voices, you're like, okay, the message is getting through to these guys. They have bought into Jonathan Gannon's system. So you can see all that, and I think there are some draft picks that Monty has taken that are really panning out nicely early in their careers. Again, we still have to see what Darius, what B.J. Ojulari can do. Let's see how Marvin develops. But there are good early signs. Monty wants to build sustainable success through the draft. That's the approach that he has taken. They had a chance maybe to go out and make some big splashes in free agency, but he wanted to stay the course and let this thing develop a little more slowly. So that's the approach. We'll see if it pans out. But like I said, I think the early returns, if you talk to anybody around this organization, are good. They believe in where this team is going right now, where this franchise is headed.
It was interesting for me just going through as part of my prep, and I'm looking at like where they rank in certain categories, and I always kind of, I don't know, it's like you kind of forget about the Cardinals. You forget about kind of what they've done, where they are, and I don't say that as a slight at all. Like, and I hope that you don't take it that way, but you just like forget. I think they're 6-5. They've done what they've done. They have some really, like Trey McBride. The guy is all over the field with 60-plus catches. James Conner, I think the only running back with a better yards after contact than James Conner in like the last 2 years is Derrick Henry. Like, so, what he's done is very impressive. You just kind of forget about it. So that's why I'm looking forward to Sunday. I really am.
Yeah, we'll see what this team can do the rest of the season. This is obviously a tough game. They lose this, they're back to 500, but I still feel like they're in the NFC West race because, listen, the 49ers have been banged up all season. The Rams have had some injuries. Nobody has separated themselves from the pack. So even if you lose this game, they come back home the following week. They get the Seahawks again. I expect a response in that game. And then they get the Patriots and Carolina. So they have a chance to really put themselves in a good position heading into the final 2 games of the season against the 49ers and the Rams. So they're still in it. I think they're going to be in it to the wire, which is an unbelievable accomplishment, I think, for this franchise coming off a 4-win season where they just looked awful.
Yeah, I got a text from somebody in Seattle, and they're like, you guys better take care of business. I'm like, I don't work for the team. It's not how it goes. But I assume you expect the Vikings to win this game?
Yeah, I do. I just think this is a really tough matchup for a variety of reasons. We talked about the defensive versatility of that team. I think that can give them problems. Their explosiveness off the edge. We'll see how the Cardinals tackles. Paris Johnson's had a very good season. Jonah's got to step it up, but they've been susceptible at times to pressure. And last week in Seattle, they might have provided a blueprint for how to attack Kyler and keep him contained, because I thought they did a really good job of cutting off his running angles. But you mentioned the playmakers on Minnesota's offense. I think that's the thing that's the scariest. If the Cardinals can't generate pressure, they could be in for a very long day against those receivers.
I'll also say Justin Jefferson is kind of, he's getting antsy for like the big one. And so you wonder if, when you pair those things together, if this could be, if it could be tough. Craig, appreciate you hopping on. I will let you get out to Tucson for what will be a very fun college football game out there with a guy who's doing a heck of a job in Kenny Dillingham. But I appreciate you hopping on. It's good to catch up. Thanks for doing it on a Saturday morning. And, we'll talk down the line. No question about it.
All right. Great talking to you, Alec. Enjoy the game.
And that'll do it for the Alec Lewis Show. That is Craig Morgan of PHNX in the All City Network. It is a really fascinating entity that is a conversation unto itself. But yeah, appreciate him hopping on the show. He is close with Michael Russo, who covers hockey in this market, as you guys know. I don't know why I'm telling you that. He's a legend here. But no, Craig was awesome. Kind of reminded me from a voice standpoint of Mel Kiper a little bit, which, I mean, the analysis was spectacular. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoy the game Sunday. It should be a very interesting one. His prediction was there. Mine is as well. I think I said in the Athletic 26-20. To me, that just makes sense. In terms of, I don't know, I expect a one-score game because it's the NFL, and I think the Vikings will win because they have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and a coaching staff that's really, really good. I will be very interested to see if the Cardinals can block up Brian Flores' system, and really how the Vikings try to attack Kyler Murray in general. So, should be a really fun game. Hope you guys enjoy it. Just like we said at the top, please like and subscribe this. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit that button right there. Helps us out. Brings it to more people. And then Spotify and Apple, you rate and review. Give us 5 stars, whatever the heck you want to give. We would appreciate that. The show, again, presented by First Resource Bank, a phenomenal local company with really, really good people. And Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson. Go check them out. The link will be in the description below. That'll do it for episode 36 of the Alec Lewis Show. We will see you guys next week.